Oh, good afternoon. Before we get started. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. I hope we don't have network errors tonight. Yeah, it looks to be okay so far. Um, all right. So, welcome, folks. Welcome to Prophecy Montana podcast. My name is Kerry Martin, and thank you for joining us today. We're going to be talking about drones. Hey, Watchman, how you doing? How's it going, man? Yeah, we're going to be talking about these drones. I've been watching a lot of news footage. I've been talking to a lot of different people. Watch the Joe Rogan podcast. He had somebody that was and I'm going to forget now, but I think he was some head of in the armed forces. He was a head of some drone operation, and so that was an interesting talk as well. And so I thought we would start this podcast off. And also, might want to mention that I've done some filming of my own a couple nights ago and just a few minutes ago. So we have some footage we're going to be showing you here in just a little bit shortly. And also, we have our phone line hooked up to where anybody can call in. So I will be putting that up right now. And so whoever wants to call in can call in and be a part of the conversation as we go along. I'm sure would love to have you call in, Watchman, but I know you've got your secrets, your secrecy to protect. So I mean, if you are willing, we'd love you to, but if not, we totally understand as well. But so anyways, these drones over New Jersey. I want to say New Jersey. See what I did there? New Jersey. Now, according to the Joe Rogan podcast and the fellow that was joining, and I should probably have remembered his name, but he said that this has been an occurrence for the last 3 years in this drone activity, especially over some of the military bases there on the East Coast as well, which, flying drones over restricted airspace like that is highly illegal. And I think most drones, especially in the East Coast, and I don't know about here in Montana, I don't know if they have, I think you have to register them if you fly above a certain height, but over in New Jersey, I think pretty much everything has to be registered if it's going to be flying. And so they have a certain signal that has to be broadcast on these drones, and that signal will identify the drone and tell whoever's curious who's flying this drone. And so they'll be able to actually get the person's information. So this tells me, and the U.S. military has been questioned many times, and we're not just talking to like regular sized drones. We're not talking, when people say drones, they're thinking something like this, but the ones that are being actually reported, if you guys haven't been following the news already, they're about the size of a small car or an SUV even. Let me see. The drones really don't even fit the sniffer theory. What's the sniffer theory? Please catch me up on that, Watchman. I'm not real familiar with that one. But yeah, these drones are supposed to have a signature. And yes, the Orbs as well. We're going to talk about that too. The Orbs in the Oregon coast seem different, and the East almost could be a distraction. Yeah, and we're also going to talk about that as well, because I watched the video. He was one of the guys that was working for the PSYOPs in the U.S. military. He's got his own YouTube channel now, and I was watching him, and he basically said the whole thing's a big PSYOP, psychological operation. Now, there's multiple reasons why you would want to do that, to have a psychological operation, and one of them would be for distraction, obviously, right? If something's going on that you don't want people to focus on, then you obviously would stage a distraction, and there's lots of different ways to do this, and I believe maybe even, COVID might have been one of those, psyops to distract and to divert people's attention to something else that is not important. So, and yeah, again, if you guys would like to call in, I've got the phone number up there on the screen, and so that should make the conversation more interesting. Let me get these on just in case we do get a phone call. I won't forget to put them on and be wandering around trying to figure out what's going on. But so far as I can recollect, these drones are large. They're about the size of an SUV, and some of them are very loud, and some of them can't be heard at all, but the lights can be seen. And they had some people out there on the East Coast, some hobbyists, that were photographing these things and catching, video of them. And oftentimes when they would zoom in on these things, they would disappear. And so they have some kind of cloaking device, but then when they would disappear, they would catch them in a different, what do you call that? A different shade of light, spectrum, a different spectrum of light. And so then they would, as soon as they would focus in on that spectrum, they would disappear again, and they would have to, keep switching spectrums to be able to focus in on these things. So they have some kind of cloaking ability, and obviously this is like way above and beyond a lot of what, we think that the U.S. government is capable of doing. And Watchman, that's a good point. Maybe the angels are getting ready to collect the elect from the four corners, and I wanted to talk about that too. And we are going to kind of get around to that, because these orbs that have been spotted are something that I've seen myself with my own eyes. So it's these orbs are, I don't know what they are really. I guess I've told the story 2 or 3 different times about one that I've seen. I've talked to a lot of different people, and other people that I've, credible people. I mean, I don't know how credible I come across, but, my wife and I, we were driving along the road, and we happened to see one of these just kind of, not that far from the truck. I stopped in the middle of the road, and we sat there and we looked at it for a long time. Some vehicles stopped behind us, and they were looking at it. And I went back there and I talked to them. Hey, did you just see that thing? They said, yeah. And it was fairly close. I mean, you could really, but the thing of it is, it was almost like a reflection, and I couldn't make out details, but it was perfectly round. It was a perfect sphere. And when it took off, in technical terms, like when something foreshortens, the further it gets away, the slower it appears to travel. Well, this didn't do that. It traveled the same speed, and it appeared to travel the same speed no matter how far it got away. In perspective wise, right? Which normally, you would see something and it would get out on the horizon and appear to go slower and slower and slower the further it gets away. But this had the same speed as it went through, and I could see it going through clouds and everything else. It was a real object, and it was sitting there looking at us, and we were looking at it. Now, and it was silent, and there was no signature of a thruster or any kind of propellant being burned to make this thing fly. There was no noise, so it was silent as well. And so, I've gone and I've watched like Bob Lazar, the Bob Lazar interview with Joe Rogan. I found that to be very interesting, because he said that some of these crafts are actually dug up from archaeological sites, and and to me, this sort of fits the biblical perspective of the ancient world, because the ancient world was very sophisticated, and or these are demonic in origin, right? They're either archaeological finds that we've dug up, or they're alien and not alien. I'm sorry, they're demonic in origin. Well, I'm going to use that word interchangeably, because when you hear like people use, especially the Department of Defense has just come out and said that aliens do exist, but they don't come from other planets. They actually have resided here for thousands of years. Go figure, right? So alien is a code word for demon. And so these are not actually aliens that we're not talking about from other planets, because God has quarantined our planet on this earth, and he's made it unavailable, if you will, for the other, and the other nations wouldn't violate God's directive anyways to come here. They wouldn't want to come here, because this world is infected with sin. And so there has been a quarantine, if you will, and that's biblical. I mean, you can read in Deuteronomy about quarantines and how they work. And which cracked me up during the pandemic, because they said, well, I'm going to go with science on this one. I'm not going to follow the Bible. We need to quarantine. Well, where do you think the quarantine was the first place it was ever spoke of? And that would be, in the Bible. So, a lot of people don't know their Bible. So anyways, these are Bob Lazar had a lot to say about it, and his perspective was that these were very, very old. They came from, and if you read the book Secrets of the Lost Races, he speaks about, in these clay tablets that they've deciphered, the Tel Elamine tablets, where the tablets spoke of these flying vimanas, right? And these things would use the latent power of Mercury to be able to fly, and they had this weapon called the Agano weapon, which when fired upon cities would destroy whole cities and cause the sands to melt, which interestingly enough, those same areas that were written down on those clay tablets that were fired upon, we can find this glass sand that is present only in nuclear sites. So there's some credibility. Like, you have to dig deep in your mind to really kind of to grasp a hold of all this stuff. But these things could have been happening during biblical times, and there could have been a very smart race of people that rose up in a very short amount of time. Just like, our modern society has only, with the technology that we have, has only been around for about 100 years. Prior to that, the mechanical age, a little bit longer, but with like computer technology and all of the stuff that we have today is very, very recent. So good evening, Kevin. How you doing, man? Let me catch, Watchman says, Miami Mail, they say that there are 10-foot translucent figures and their people were scared out of their minds. And don't forget, if this is in fact psyops like they say, then what I'm thinking is that maybe even the demons can join in on the psyop, if you will, because it was probably planned by them in the first place. Let's get used to seeing things in the sky. Let's get people's attention distracted, the Project 2025. Now, Ricky is very excited about Project 2025 because, he's learned about it a long time ago, and he's been blowing a whistle about it, and he's been sharing things with me, and it got me excited about this Project 2025, and there's a lot of fear amongst certain groups of people that could be, being pushed through as we speak. So, especially with the Trump administration coming in. So, Kevin says, I think we dismiss ancient people too easily. Yeah, and I think so, Kevin. Listen, the ancient peoples, we are told, through school that they were just cavemen, banging rocks together and stuff, and I get it. Those people existed back then. They still exist today. Ancient man and modern man has always lived side by side. And I think there's been periods of time, in the past, and we have artifacts that prove it, where there was levels of sophistication, probably even equal to where we're at today, or even way surpasses it, because, especially right after the flood, man was had great capacity still in his mind. It hadn't been diminished over time with sin, and so they were able to work out complex mathematical problems and if you will, what we call quantum physics, where quantum physics seemed to defy ordinary physics in a lot of ways. Like if you take a bumblebee, for example, bumblebee shouldn't fly by today's knowledge of avionics, because their wings are too small, but somehow they do fly. So they had to go back in and look at the bumblebee and examine how this little insect can fly with such small little wings, it being such a large insect. And so there's a lot that we don't understand. And I've seen supernatural things with my own eyes, and probably some of you guys have too. And I know I kind of have a feel for how these things, come across. I've never seen like dead people walking around and stuff like that, but I seen what I thought was a UFO, unidentified flying object. It was obviously a UFO because I couldn't identify it, or a UAV like they call them today. Unidentified. UAV, unidentified aerial phenomenon. Yeah, UAP, unidentified aerial vehicle, or, well, you get the idea. They got all kinds of names for them now, but essentially, I've seen that. I've seen some weird apparitions. I've seen things, and I've obviously spoke to several people who have had these weird supernatural things happen to them. So we know the supernatural world exists. We know demons exist. And we have to tell ourselves this stuff is real, okay? Because we're getting into an age now where this is going to start getting really normal, I think. We're going to start seeing this stuff all the time. Because I've said before, I think what's going to eventually happen is Satan's going to impersonate the second coming of Christ, and he may use the whole UFO thing to do this. That would be a very convenient way for it to all happen, right? And if you're Satan and you're going to impersonate the second coming of Christ, and you come down in a UFO, well, you've just captured the attention of everybody who didn't believe in God, but believed in perhaps aliens, right? Now everything makes sense, because the aliens are the ones who, and people will believe anything, but they don't want to believe that God actually created us, right? I mean, they'll believe some alien race came here and planted us on this planet and somehow nurtured us along through the ages and tweaked our DNA or whatever and crossed us with this or that. They'll believe all those things, but they won't necessarily believe that God created us, which to me is a whole lot simpler concept. I mean, what's the difference? Aliens or God? God is way better, in my opinion. It's more plausible, and it's more believable, quite frankly. A4 says, amen. It is certainly real. Yes. And so I think we're seeing a combination of things in the skies. I think we're seeing actual like high-tech drones, and these are big drones, and the military's hiding what's actually taking place, which is probably nothing more than a psyop, and we shouldn't get too focused in on what's actually taking place over there, because that's exactly what they want us to do, get focused over here and lose track of what's going over here, and the sensationalism can get people all wrapped up in this stuff. I mean, there's so much on social media. All you have to do is type in drones over New Jersey. And I was going to look up, and discerning the angels will be important. And now, have you guys looked up the verse where it talks about the signs in the sun and the moon and the stars? And it also talks about how a third of these stars fell from heaven, speaking of the angels, right? And, it's interesting that the Bible uses stars to describe demons, right? And even Satan himself is called the bright and morning star. So this word star is being used a lot. Now, if you see, like perhaps the orb that I saw, it could be mistaken as a star if it was way out there, easily mistaken. And so, let me see. The aliens are more like an angelic being, more than likely interdimensional. Well, but here's the thing, Watchmen, they can look like anything they want to look like. And so this is the problem, that these angels have the ability, these fallen angels have the ability to actually take the appearance of like a gray, like what we would consider like the typical, stereotypical alien look. And they can deceive us. Like, I think there was a family who had some, they saw a fireball falling out of the sky, it landed on the ground. The police were all alerted in the neighborhood. And it just happened to fall in this backyard of these people who witnessed these beings walking around. We're seeing more and more of these types of reports all the time. And it's like, it's conditioning our mind to get used to it. And there's a reason for this. It's not strange anymore to see these lights, these things in the skies. So, okay, Watchman's given us Revelation 6:13. Let's see what we got there. I think that was, and there was war in heaven, right? Is that what we're talking about? Hang on, just give me 1 second here and I'll look this up. Oh my goodness. It's showing me an ad. I really love these ads for my Bible app. I'm going to have to just pay a few extra dollars and actually, let me see here. Oops. Oh no. Sorry guys, I'm just trying to get to my, there it is. All right. All right, so Revelations 6:13. And the stars of heaven fell into the earth, even as a fig tree casteth her untimely figs when she is shaken of a mighty wind. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's right before the coming of Jesus. That's at the sixth seal. Now, the stars of heaven falling. Now, that's actually kind of a good angle. I know you've brought that verse up before, Watchman, and, prior to the sighting of all these drones, I would have said, well, this had to be something like, like what was witnessed during Abraham Lincoln's time, right, where the stars actually did fall from heaven. It was like a meteor shower, right? But maybe this is describing some kind of event. I don't know. I mean, it could have a dual purpose. I'm open for these things. Now, historically, Adventism has always believed that this was going to be another meteor shower, possibly in the future as well. All right, so Job 38:7. Let's take a look at that real quick. Okay, Job 38:7. And that's where the sons of God came together. I'm just guessing. Job. No, because that's in the latter part. When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy. Good one. Thank you, A-Force. That was a good one, man. When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy. Now, I want to show you guys something. I told you I was going to show you a little video. Let's pull this puppy up and see what we can do. All right. Hang on just a sec. Let me get you guys on my other screen here. That's a video I took myself. I lost the batteries on my mouse. It's very awkward reaching over like this too. All right, let's just watch this video. So I saw a bright light that was blinking in the sky, and I took this little short video. I took about 4 videos of these things. All right, so there's that. Now, and I've got a couple more just like it. Now, I've been doing some research, and that video I took is very similar to a lot of the videos that you're seeing that are being described as an orb. Well, I think, and I'm no expert, somebody else can maybe, educate me a little bit on this, but I think that that's actually just a star, and the way that they come through the, hang on. Whoops. Missed a couple. Let me see. I see it almost like a Russian missile. Well, in the mess, the confusion, you would be gathered up, and you meet Jesus in the clouds. The last days are hard to discern on these things, but it's more called harvest than anything. Wow. I saw the same thing last July. Okay, so A-Force, this could just be like a regular star. And I've got I saw 2 separate stars up there about 3 nights ago, and that was one of the videos that I shot. I'll show you the other videos here in a sec. And then I shot some other videos, and they're all very similar, but they're like really bright stars that I'm zooming in on, and they actually look like they had like blinking lights or something on them. And when I zoomed in, I could kind of see the different spectrums of light, kind of swirling around. And so some of the people that I've been watching these videos say, oh, yeah, that's a star, or that's such and such a planet, or this is, and that's how they look when they're coming through the, especially the way the light is in the lens of the camera. And so let me get you another one. And I don't know, you hear so much on the internet, you don't know what's what. Let me get you on. All right, let me get you back over here. Okay. Let me get you video number 2 here. Let's take a look at this. Now that was out of focus, and then it's back into focus again. This is a separate light in the sky that I saw. And it would make sense that this is a star. But again, I don't know. I'm going to be filming some more stars in the future, and we're going to be kind of just, checking things out. So that was that. Let me get you in on the... Now, this star didn't have the same look. This was just a little while ago. Now, as I zoom in on it, it just looks like a star. It doesn't have that weird oscillating look to it. But it was a very bright light in the sky. Okay, so there's that one. And then I'll show you guys the last one, which was filmed just a few seconds away from that one I just showed you. Okay, so I zoom out, and then, well, I zoom in and then I lose it, and then I zoom out and I zoom back in and watch what happens. So I have to zoom back out to find it, and then I zoom back in, and then I get that. So that might just be out of focus. I don't know. But that is a very interesting looking light pattern. So there it is. And let me see here. It looks pretty much like the one I posted in the chat. Okay. Can you email me that as well, Watchman? And the one I saw came down from the sky and went across my neighborhood. I got a pretty good look at it and felt within myself that it was certainly alive. Yeah, you know, and that's funny because the orb that I saw did, you know, and the thing I saw, the orb that I saw was definitely no light. It was definitely no anomaly. It was something that was very crisp and clear. It was very close, very close. I mean, I almost could reach out and touch it. It was that close. So in my mind, there's definitely a difference between, you know, like what I just showed you was a little ambiguous, right? That could just be how a star looks. But, and this is what we're seeing a lot of what people are calling these orbs. But what you're explaining, that's going across the sky, across the neighborhood, now stars don't move like that, right? Now, if one of those things started moving around, now my wife said she was looking at it and it disappeared and then it came back again. So, and I didn't see that. But I have no reason to doubt her, of course. Now, she used to see these things all the time when she was a little kid. Of course, she wasn't connected with God in the same way she is today. But here's the thing. You know, I saw something the other night, and I almost forgot to tell you guys this. I saw something the other night, and I know I was right with God. I hadn't, you know, I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was just talking to my friend, and because that's important, right? I'm like if we're sinning, if we're doing something we shouldn't be doing, and we see these things in the sky, well, it could be a demonic manifestation, right? But if you're doing everything right, and you're not sinning, I mean, consciously, right? I mean, grace covers what we don't know what we're doing. I guess I'm trying to be like humble at the same time and not sound arrogant when I'm saying that I wasn't sinning, but I'm not doing anything wrong, okay, basically. And I'm talking to my friend on the phone, and I'm looking out my window like I often do, and this about the size of a full moon is what I saw. It was about the size of a full moon, and it had a great big halo around it, you know, off in the distance. If you see the moon, and it's probably about that big around, and it had a halo maybe about this size, and it went very quickly across the sky, lit the whole sky up, and it went behind the very first mountain and in between two mountains. There was a mountain further off, and there was a mountain closer up, and it went right in between them, and very quick. And I told Aaron, I said, wow, I just saw a big light in the sky just, you know, fall. And then so my wife saw the very same thing about a week ago. And so there's all these things happening now. Are these all evil angels? Well, maybe not. Maybe some of these are actually good angels that are, you know, fighting a war, if you will, because there's lots going on. I mean, if the evil angels are down here trying to harm man, then good angels are going to be out in force actually trying to protect us as well. So, and sometimes these things are seen with the naked eye. That's my theory behind it, you know, and that's how I have to look. I have to look through everything with the lens of the Bible and how it interprets things, because I'm seeing things, people are seeing things, you know, and I know they're not an alien force. I know some extraterrestrials not coming down to Earth to visit us or to make war or to do whatever people think in their minds. You know, although that might be easier for some people to believe in than God, But in my mind, these are angels, evil or good or otherwise. Now, the orb that I saw come across the sky, it could very easily have been a holy angel. I have no idea. Now, Watchman says the drones back east actually could be some sort of a project gotten loose, but things aren't adding up in a lot of different directions. And that's why I think, I'm going to go with the PSYOP for now, just to distract people for the time being. Now, it could be bigger. It actually could be that Satan is making a play on mankind, and this is going to turn into something bigger, right? Now, there's reports, and I don't know how true they are, but they had one of these drones fly over Malmstrom Air Force Base up just by Great Falls up here in Montana, and they scrambled a couple jets to try and intercept it, and of course it disappeared. Now, this sort of stuff used to happen all the time in the 60s. It was very common and I think what the government was doing back then was kind of smart. If you see anything in the sky, give us a call. We'll immediately, investigate, right? Well, we knew that the Russians were doing some things, and that was a smart way to get a bunch of eyes in the sky, right? And to have everybody watching, and if anything happened that was weird, they'd get a phone call, the jets were scrambled, head out there, check it out. And so a lot of this stuff was happening in the 60s. People's eyes were always up in the sky, and now all of a sudden everybody's eyes are in the sky as well. So A4 says, I agree. Just before I saw the orb, I had been struggling with God in prayer. I was pleading. Oh, that's right. You told me about this. I remember struggling with God in prayer. I was pleading and entreating the Lord, and I thought I heard a voice say, go outside to the patio. Interesting. Okay. So God had shown you that the angels were indeed on your side, and they were indeed fighting on your behalf. And I think that's part of what's going on. I mean, it has to be. This can't just be all evil angels. I'm not going to give them all the glory. I mean, if the Greys knock on your door tonight and they, want to show you their spaceship, don't go, man. Rebuke them in the name of Jesus. That's what I'm saying. But, an angel of the Lord is not going to come to us disguised as something nefarious. They're going to come to us maybe because we're told in the Bible that, do not be careful in entertaining strangers, for by doing so, some have entertained angels, right? And so, and we know that Abraham, when he first saw the angel of the Lord, I mean, this was Jesus himself coming with whoever next to him, probably some very high-ranking angels along with him. They came to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, and he thought they were ordinary men at first, right? So, and Joshua, the same thing, and many of the people in the Bible were approached by what looked like ordinary men. They weren't approached by monsters or evil alien-looking things. Or now, here's what's interesting. I was watching this was a YouTube and I should save these. I should get the links. Watchman, you're really good with that stuff, man. But I'm not. I'll watch something and then I'll think, well, I should have saved that, and I didn't, But there was this pastor that had a YouTube channel that specifically would interview people who had these extraterrestrial abduction experiences, right? And he interviewed some 300 of them. I don't know how in the world you find 300 of these people that, that have had these experiences, but somehow he was able to advertise, and people called him, or he, heard stories, and he'd find these people, excuse me, every single time. Get this. So, yes, maybe I'm excited. So, I want to get it all out at once. I can't say it fast enough. So he would go and he would visit these people, and they would tell him the stories. Now, something that he noticed that was common amongst these people was that those who were being abducted, in the very process of being abducted, hang on here, what did I get? I got a notification. Okay, Watchman just gave me an email, notified it very loudly in my ear. Did you guys hear that too? So he interviewed these people, and there was, out of 300 people, those who were being abducted and in the very process of being abducted, and also those who went through sleep paralysis and cried out to the Lord, these experiences immediately halted. immediately halted, and they gained control of their faculties again. But those who didn't went through these experiences. Now, what this tells me is that these are demonic in origin. If they listen to the name of Jesus, these are evil agencies. They go beyond what we know as this is bigger than, like some alien invasion. I mean, if it's an alien and God doesn't exist, why are they listening to the name of Jesus? And so, anyways, I got a number up there. You guys can call if you'd like, join the conversation, or if you guys have any questions, comments, or otherwise. Even if it's really short, you guys can just give us a call. I got my number up there on the screen, and so love for someone to give me a call. I'm so lonely. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not lonely with you guys. I've had the sleep paralysis and called out for God and got out of it. Okay, so there's a personal testimony right there. And you know something, Watchman? I have too. I used to suffer it a lot when I was a kid, in fact. And never saw, the movie Fire in the Sky was one of those abduction experiences. And, but they didn't cry out to Jesus, But listen, if we're in trouble like that, we're going to see weird things. We're going to see more and more of these things. We might be caught up in some of these illusions that the devil has placed upon us. And it just doesn't hurt to have Jesus by your side at all times. I asked Jesus in special prayer what the orb was, and and maybe it's just not for us to fully know these things, and maybe it's just for us to take it by faith. If the angels are stars, not stars, they're not stars, but they have the appearance of maybe a star, right? Then that makes sense to me. And maybe he's, maybe we're being trained by God too to look further into this, not accept everything by eyesight. That's not where I'm going with that, because we have to live by faith, right? We can't really believe what our eyes show us, unless the Bible specifically gives us direction in how to deal with these things. But right now, there's not a whole lot of information on who these angels are and what they look like. And but I'm sure, like I said before, if God wants an angel to come visit us, it will be in a very lovely form. It's not going to be in anything evil. It's not going to be one of our ancestors. It's not going to be a person that once was alive that's now dead. God's not going to impersonate anybody like that, because he's not going to try and intentionally deceive anybody. In other words, the Bible says that the dead are dead. They know not nothing. And so if you're seeing like a past loved one that comes back to you, that's a problem. That's a big problem, because that instantly right there tells me that that's something that the devil would do. That's an apparition. We're living real time of the great revealing. And man, I think you're right, Watchman. I think this is a time where we're going to see things. If you notice in the Bible, like miracles happen in waves, right? And especially the miracles that God gives mankind. And I think the devil has learned some sophisticated ways to create miracles as well, or to the illusion of miracles. So again, we got to be careful. We can't base our faith on miracles. If we see for instance, a miracle healer that comes along, we can't, in our mind necessarily think, well, gee, this miracle healer healed this guy, so he must have the truth, so I'm going to listen to everything this guy says. And that's a lot of how Satan works. He'll gain our confidence through, last week we were talking about, charismatic people. Well, there's people out there that will make these miracles. And a lot of other countries, they have people that do these things all the time, countries like India, Africa. My aunt was a missionary in Africa for many, many years. And she spent 40 or 45 years or something like that in Ethiopia during the worst times of the drought. I mean, they saw some things over there, They would go to baptize some people, and they would give them Bible studies and everything. Everything was fine until they tried to dunk them in the water, and the demons would cry out, and they'd get the superhuman strength, right? And they were resisting the pastor that was trying to baptize them. Well, the pastors were used to this. I mean, this was some crazy stories my aunt used to tell me. They were used to this stuff, and they were ready for it. And they had these great big old, great big pastors that were waiting on the shore for this very event, because it would happen a lot. And they would run out there, and it sounds brutal, but they would grab these this poor 90-pound woman or whatever that was resisting and they would all jump on her and force her under the water. And as soon as she came up, she was clean. The demon was gone. And so these amazing things would happen, and they would see him all the time. I remember watching some Walter Veith, and he was talking about the shape-shifting, and how a baboon was stealing food in a camp, and it kept stealing the food, and finally somebody was going to do something about it, and they got a rifle, and one of the villagers had a rifle, and they had a few bullets for it, and finally they caught this thing in the cafeteria, and they shot it, and it ran off. I mean, it wasn't a killing blow, but it did wound it, and this thing ran off, and it was baboon tracks all the way out to where it died, and there lay a man, right? And he said these weird things would happen a lot in these other countries. And in America, I think we're starting to see them too. Now, listen, when we see these school shootings, and we just had a couple in some Christian schools. We had one in an Advent school, and this was very alarming to me. I want to do another talk about that too, because I think it's important that we're protecting these children properly. I don't think we are. I'm looking at my own, I don't want to say too much, but I'm looking at some schools around here, and they're very vulnerable. They're very vulnerable, and I just, the devil's out, and he's out to get us, but in any way he possibly can. But we're seeing demonic activity. These demons are taking over some of our children and causing them to do terrible things, these terrible crimes. I remember back in California, here's a terrible story. I think I can tell it now because I'm pretty sure the old lady has finally passed away. But she was a good friend of ours, and I won't mention her name, but she was a very good friend of ours. She would go to the church in King City, and that was probably too much information. Anyways, but just lovely, godly woman, right? And so she had a grandson, and she had great hopes for this grandson. Well, the grandson got into drugs. He got into gangs. And the next thing you know, he gets high on bath salts, and he stabs his poor grandmother, I forget, like 15 times in the kitchen. The father, his grandfather, came to rescue his poor wife. He gets stabbed a bunch of times. They're both laying on a pool of blood on the floor. But he did manage to get a phone call off to the police. The police came. He jumps on the police officers. He's hiding behind something when they came to the door, and he stabs one of the police officers and kills him. They damn near beat this. Sorry, I get emotional about this stuff because these are people we know. Apologize about the language. He darn near. These police officers nearly kill this poor kid, and they rightly should have, in my opinion. But they about beat him half to death. He woke up the next day not even knowing what had happened, and of course he was convicted and he's probably in prison still today. But just terrible things like that happening everywhere, and of course she recovered over time, and so did her husband, thankfully, and but just a terrible, terrible thing, and this demonic possession. When our children are doing drugs, when they're drinking, when they're doing these things, they're being taken over. And even with the music is affecting our children. They become demonically possessed. They go out and they do these horrible crimes. And it's just some of the worst things that we're ever witnessing. And the bad thing is we're getting used to seeing it. We're actually being conditioned to get used to it. I mean, there was just another school shooting just recently. I just heard on the news. So these things are happening in such frequency anymore that it's alarming. And I don't know. I mean, for me, it's just come, Lord Jesus, come. Things are going to get so bad. We're told that there's going to be a time of trouble such as there never was. No, not since the beginning of time. And that time of trouble is going to entail a lot of bad things happening. I can see how those things, Watchmen. It appears our Congress and House is completely possessed. Well, there's good people in there, man. God always has his people. Even with Pharaoh, he had a Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And all throughout the ages, he's always had his people working right next to the leaders, and this is part and parcel of how God works, when Daniel was praying, Gabriel was detained by the kings of Medo-Persia, namely namely the other demons that were controlling all of these different things that were going on. It's like a big charade is being played on us. It is, man. It's theater. I find it very interesting that the President of the United States elect is an actor. And we've had actors as presidents before. It's Arnold Schwarzenegger was the governor of California, and so on and so forth. Hey, let's check out this verse by Watchman. It's always good to look up a few verses amongst all of the crazy rantings of mine. I know I can get pretty far out there. That's why, well, hopefully sometime soon here we're going to have Ricky back with us. He's more than likely working. I mean, he's been working his tail off, and he doesn't usually work this time of year. He usually gets laid off, so he's a little bummed about that. He was expecting to be laid off. But as the winter progresses and things get harder and harder, the ground will eventually freeze solid. I mean, the ground has not really been frozen yet, if you can believe that. I mean, it has not been cold at all here. So, hey, Mary, how's it going? Glad to see you here on the live stream. We've just been talking up a storm about all kinds of crazy stuff. And let me see here. Jeremiah 51, 57, 58. And I will make drunk her princes and her wise men, her captains and her rulers, and her mighty men, and they shall sleep a perpetual sleep and not wake, saith the King, whose name is the Lord of hosts. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the broad walls of Babylon shall be utterly broken, and her high gates shall be burned with fire, and the people shall labor in vain, and the folks in the fire, and they shall be weary. That's interesting, because now we know the real Babylon, the actual Babylon, will never be rebuilt again, right? We were told in prophecy that it would never be rebuilt. It would be the habitation of jackals, and owls would lodge in its palaces. But there is a Babylon in Revelation, huh? It says Babylon has fallen. It falls twice, actually. You know, the first Babylon fell. We're waiting for the second one to fall, too. And that Babylon, we've talked about it many times here in Prophecy, Montana. It's a system of confusion. It's a confused system of worship that leads us away from God, actually. And so, and that's interesting how it says, and I will make drunk her princes and her wise men, her captains and her rulers and her mighty men, and they shall sleep a perpetual sleep. And so, you know, it's interesting how when people believe a lie, we're told in the Bible that God will send a strong delusion when they reject truth. I don't think God is responsible for sending them. I mean, they rejected it. That's what made them by default, you know, believe a lie, because you got to believe something, right? But that's what they've done here. They've rejected the truth, and so they're wide open to a lie. So again, I just want to mention to everybody who's watching, the phone line is open, and you guys can call in if you'd like. So. And I did test it earlier. My wife did. This is not my actual phone number, but I was able to get an online app that gave me this phone number that you guys are seeing on there. But it does connect to my phone, or at least it should. Hopefully you guys haven't. Hopefully it's working. So, anyways, okay. So Watchman says it means when God brings judgment on a nation, He brings madness into the hearts of the leaders. Well, you know, and these are the leaders already mad prior? You know, I mean, I think the judgments, you know, we were talking about that the other day privately with some of my friends, and, you know, it seems like God has a period of time where He actually, He endures, you know, like certain behavior for a period of time. Like, you know, it appears sometimes how the wicked prosper. You know, that it tells us in, was it Ecclesiastes or is it Proverbs? Proverbs, it tells us that it appears like the wicked prosper and that the righteous die before their time. And there is that feeling that things just go on and on and on forever and ever, right? Because God is gracious. He wishes that none should perish, but all should receive everlasting life. But the problem is that these people won't. And there comes a time when God's mercy ends for these people. Their time of probation, if you will, closes. And He pours out judgment on these people. And I think the judgment is really designed to do two things. It designs to wake people up, because I've been struck with the holy 2x4 once or twice in my life. I mean, that's how my late friend Tom Brink used to say, struck with the holy 2x4, right? And so I've been hit with that once or twice in my life, and it did. It woke me right up, and I praise God for it. It was a very unfun thing to go through at the time, but it was very necessary, and I'm glad that God was able to wake me up. But then there's also another aspect of that judgment of God, and that is that God judges to prolong things. You know, he brings a halt to some people's mischief to prolong the days to an appointed time, if that makes sense, because there's an appointed time for everything. Isaiah, let me see. Watchman gave us Isaiah 40:26. Let's check that out. 40:26. Lift up your eyes on high, and behold, who hath created these things, that bringing out their host by number, he calleth them all by names in the greatness of his might, for that he is strong in power, not one faileth. Let me see. Yeah, maybe. I mean, I see what you're saying. The leaders are spiritually asleep. They can't see what's coming. And that's what's happened. Well, you know, and there's so much secrecy in our system of government right now. I mean, they have to obviously know what's happening in the skies over New Jersey. I mean, come on. You can't have these SUV-sized drones flying all over the place and not know what they are or who's flying them. You know, there was even somebody in Congress that suggested this could be Iran, and I don't see Iran having this type of sophistication without help, if you will, without help. And and that's kind of what we're looking at. So Mary says, my mom used to say that the wicked prosper because it's like when a child is terminally ill and you want to give him everything he or she wants before he or she passes from this earth. You know, and that's actually a really good viewpoint on it, because I think that's what he does. I mean, life is precious, right? And life is precious to God too. And look, these people only have so much time to live on this earth, and then it's gone, and it's gone forever. So why make their life miserable? Why not just, you know, make it the best that he possibly can? And if we understand that sort of, you know, how that works, you know, it might make us feel a little bit better about our wicked neighbors or whatever. It says, so God gives them or lets them prosper, since that's all they have, no eternal life. Yeah, that's right. So, so I think the takeaway so far, I mean, we may have a live next week, and I might change my mind on everything I've said right now, and things could all change. But I think there's two things going on. There's a supernatural, and then there's some kind of technology that, you know, that belongs to us, flying around in the skies. And what a great way to get a distraction. What a great way to get us to look somewhere else. You know, I mean, we're looking up at the drones, but we're not looking up for Jesus, you know, and that's the takeaway, is that it's taken our minds off of what we should really be doing. It's kind of like it's almost like what's happening in Michigan right now, with the Michigan Conference and Conrad Vine and Ron Kelly. Said it right that time. I kept saying Patrick Kelly. I read a book that the author's name was Patrick Kelly, and that just kept, in my mind I was saying Ron Kelly, but it kept rolling off as Patrick Kelly. Didn't catch it until after the, you know, about almost, the live was almost up, and then I finally caught what I was saying. Watchman says the mothership also almost was an implant psyop in itself. Yeah. I mean, the devil is aiding wicked man in these ventures. It shouldn't surprise us if there's some of these things happening. And now, I think I speak for everybody when I say that this is something that, you know, yeah, we're going to keep a finger on the page, but, you know, just in case. But we also need to actually stay focused on Jesus and stay focused on the real. See, actual Bible prophecy is kind of boring, actually, to most people, right? I mean, it's very exciting to me. But really, when you lay it out, like I'll do a Bible prophecy thing here on Prophecy Montana. I don't get a lot of views for that. I'll get more views with the sensational, with whatever current event is taking place. Who's going to be president? Who's cheating on who? What branch of government has gone AWOL? You know, the Democrats and the Republicans, and all people love that stuff. You know, the lights in the sky, and these things catch my attention too for a moment. I mean, for a quick minute, but then you know I'm always directed to go back and stay focused on what the actual events are. It's not exciting to people when you tell them that there's coming Sunday law. That doesn't excite people. That doesn't get the juices flowing. What they really want to see is the blood and the guts and the gore. They don't want to hear that there's a Sunday law where they're going to have to humble themselves and give up their rights and as a people and be treated really badly, quite frankly, for a little short amount of time. They don't want to hear that. That's terrible news. But, you know, the evil human heart needs to be changed. And how else is it going to be changed outside of literally going through hardships and trials? Because that's what really shapes mankind. That's what really brings us into submission to God's will. Let me see here. Okay, A4 says, there are people in our government and in the limelight that know the truth, but has rejected it for the sake of their political safety and acceptance. They've traded God for money and fame. Yeah, the mammon. Dr. Steve Greer believes there's two things going on as well as government conspiracy and actual events. Okay. Trish in Progress says, that's at Watchman, okay? So, but she quoted Isaiah 40:26. I think I already read that one. Maybe I have. So, but yeah, the takeaway is that we need God's changing power in our lives, and the only way that's going to happen is if we allow God to refine us in that fire. That's a boring thing to say. It's a boring thing to hear, you know, especially with, you know, the way our minds are set up for, you know, sensationalism. But it's actually the truth. And prophecy in the Bible is not exciting to a lot of people. It's just not. And so, and Trish says, you're not doing it for the views, though. Well, yes and no. I mean, I would like more people to watch these things, you know. But no, you're right. I'm not. If, you know, Ricky and I said when we started this thing, that if just one person could be changed and brought to Jesus over, you know, the work that we put into Prophecy Montana, it's all worth it. Just one person is all it really takes. But obviously we, you know, like Schindler, you know, when he freed all of those Jews from, you know, from certain death and he got them out of the country. And when he found out that he was, you know, that he could have gotten more, he was very upset about that. You know, I mean, he had this mindset of he wanted to get as many as he possibly could. And that should be all of our mindsets, is to reach as many people as we can. And we're doing that in a network. You know, Prophecy Montana is just a grain of salt in the salt shaker. You know what I'm saying? We're all little grains of salt in that shaker. And we're commissioned by God to go to the whole world and spread the gospel, right? That's our job. People say, well, what does God want me to do? He wants you to actually spread the gospel. He wants us to get out there, tell our neighbors, tell our families, tell our friends, anybody and everybody that will lend us an ear. Even if they don't lend us an ear, we still have to kind of do our best. You know, my wife's got a bunch of clothes she's been giving away lately. Every time we get a bag of clothes together, we'll put a, you know, Great Controversy. We'll put a Desire of Ages or Steps of Christ or a Bible or something in there. And, you know, just those little things. And so we're all called to work. I have so many different Bible translations, I've lost track. Okay. Well, just, I would say stick with the easiest one to read. I don't know where you're at in your Bible study, like how sophisticated you are in your Bible study, but, eventually you want to transition ultimately to the King James, because it's probably the most accurate. Now, Watchman's telling us to compare Jeremiah 50:32 with King James Version versus the New International Version. And so let me see. You guys are talking to each other. I'm sorry. So anyways, so that's the takeaway. I mean, listen, let's get right with God. That's step number one. And let's get to work. Let's get the rest of these people out there told about the good news of Jesus Christ. Regardless of how boring the message might be, they need to hear it. And the message, once they hear it, once they accept it, is not a boring message at all. It's a very, very uplifting, very joyful message, and at least it has been for me. So with that, folks, hey, no phone calls tonight, but that's okay. We were all set up to do it, and we're going to continue every Wednesday to have that ability to make phone calls. So you guys think about whether or not you guys will be able to make a phone call in the future, and if you guys would like to do that and let me hear your voice or something, and you guys could ask questions or maybe make comments and let other people get to know you guys a little bit better as well. So, and that's what this really is about. This is not about me. It's not about, I mean, there's a team that's involved with Prophecy Montana, and you guys are part of that team. It's about the collective, right? It's about us working in concert to bring this message to the world. Because believe it or not, when they watch these videos, they also read your guys' comments, and I think your guys' comments are so important for that very reason, because each one of you guys have contributed to the live streams, to the videos as well, and that's where I go, straight to the comments, and I read them, and there's lots of Bible verses. You guys are very well versed in the Bible, so God bless you guys. And with the final word from Mary, she said, God bless everyone here. And yes, I echo that sentiment very much. So thank you guys so much for all of your wonderful support, for your prayers. Keep us in your prayers. And if you guys have any prayer requests, you guys can send them to prophecymontana@gmail.com. We're still giving out free Great Controversies to whoever would like them. So I just turned my video back on. I was wondering where that came from. So just email us at prophecymontana@gmail.com. Send prayer requests, whatever, and we'll also would love to join in with that as well. So, all right, folks, God bless you. That's enough for tonight. We'll see you later.